The CIA poisoned an entire French village and buried the evidence for 50 years. Somewhere in southern France, there is a small town called Pont-Saint-Esprit. Population, 500 people. Farmers, bakers, postmen, families. On the morning of August 16th, 1951, they all went insane. Not one or two people, not a neighborhood, the entire town. A local postman started screaming that fire and serpents were coiling around his arms. A man jumped from a third-floor window, convinced he was an airplane. An 11-year-old child tried to strangle his own mother. Dozens of people foamed at the mouth, chained to their hospital beds. 7 people died. 50 were locked in psychiatric asylums. The French government said it was the bread, bad rye, contaminated flour, a fungus. Case closed. For 50 years, nobody questioned it until an investigative journalist found a CIA document that said something else entirely. A document that someone had tried very hard to bury.
Before I tell you what was in that document, I need you to understand what was happening in the world in 1951. The Cold War was at its peak. The Korean War was active, and the CIA was desperate. Not for weapons, not for soldiers, for something far more terrifying. A weapon that didn't kill, it destroyed minds. In 1950, CIA Director Allen Dulles authorized a classified program. Its official name? Project Artichoke. Its goal, written in internal memos, to determine whether a person could be made to perform an act of assassination involuntarily, against their own will. The answer they were looking for involved a drug that had been accidentally invented just 13 years earlier. In 1938, a Swiss chemist named Albert Hofmann was working at the Sandoz Chemical Laboratory in Basel, Switzerland. He synthesized a compound called lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD-25. He had no idea what he had created.
Pont-Saint-Esprit, August 1951. This is what the records show actually happened, and what they don't. On the morning of August 16th, residents started reporting nausea, vomiting, fever. By the following night, the hallucinations began. One victim described seeing her own body covered in orange flowers that bloomed and burned simultaneously. Another man, a farmer, broke free from his hospital restraints, ran into the street, and began attacking people, convinced that demonic wolves were chasing him. A young woman woke up screaming that the walls of her bedroom were bleeding. Doctors described the scene as, and this is a direct medical account from the time, the night of the apocalypse. By the end of August, the numbers were staggering. More than 250 people affected. 50 interned in asylums. 7 confirmed dead. The French government blamed the local baker. His name was Rochebriand. They said his flour had been contaminated with ergot, a naturally occurring fungus that...
Now here's where it gets complicated. Because there was a man in the United States who knew that story was not true. His name was Frank Olson. He was a biochemist, a brilliant one. He worked at Fort Detrick, Maryland, the U.S. Army's classified biological and chemical warfare laboratory. And in 1951, he was the head of the Special Operations Division, the unit directly responsible for the CIA's LSD experiments. 2 years after Pont-Saint-Esprit, in 1953, Frank Olson fell from the window of a New York hotel on the 13th floor. The official verdict? Suicide. His family never accepted it. And decades later, when his body was exhumed, forensic investigators found evidence consistent with blunt force trauma to the skull before he fell. The question isn't just how Frank Olson died. The question is, what did he know? And why, 2 years after Pont-Saint-Esprit, did a senior CIA scientist suddenly become a liability? In 2009, an American investigative journalist named Hank Albarelli published a book called A Terrible Mistake. He had spent years filing Freedom of Information Act requests, digging through the U.S. National Archives, interviewing former CIA operatives, and he found something. A CIA document. Its title reads, and I'm giving you the exact wording, Re Pont-Saint-Esprit and F. Olson files. SO Span France Operation File, inclusive Olson. Intel files. Hand carry to Berlin. Tell him to see to it that these are buried. Read that again. Tell him to see to it that these are buried. Not filed, not archived, not reviewed. Buried. F. Olson, Frank Olson, the CIA biochemist who fell from the 13th floor 2 years later. Berlin, David Berlin, the executive director of the Rockefeller Commission, the official government body created to investigate CIA wrongdoing. Someone inside the CIA was asking the man running the investigation.
Now, I need to stop here and be honest with you. Because this is where journalism requires precision, not just drama. The CIA's involvement in Pont-Saint-Esprit is disputed. Most academic historians, including French historian Stephen Kaplan, who spent years studying the incident, accept ergot poisoning as the cause. Kaplan points out a significant problem with the LSD theory. LSD takes effect within hours of ingestion. But the residents of Pont-Saint-Esprit didn't show symptoms until 36 hours after they had eaten the bread. That timeline, Kaplan says, is inconsistent with LSD, but consistent with ergot. He also notes that many victims suffered severe digestive symptoms, nausea, vomiting, which ergot causes, but LSD does not. These are legitimate scientific objections, and they matter. What we can say with absolute certainty is this. The CIA was conducting LSD experiments on non-consenting human subjects in this exact period. MKUltra, the umbrella program, was confirmed by Congress in 1977. Project Artichoke was real. Project MK Naomi was real. The CIA's own files, released under the Freedom of Information Act, confirmed that the agency was actively looking for locations to conduct field tests of LSD on unsuspecting civilian populations. And there is a CIA document, a real document, held in the U.S. National Archives that explicitly connects Frank Olson and the CIA's Special Operations Division to Pont-Saint-Esprit. And someone tried to bury it. That part is not disputed.
There is one more detail that I think matters most. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of all MKUltra files. All of them. He knew what was in them. He knew what they would reveal. Most were destroyed, but not all. In 1977, a Freedom of Information Act request uncovered a cache of 20,000 surviving documents, stored in a financial records building, because nobody thought to look there. Those 20,000 documents triggered Senate hearings. They confirmed that the CIA had conducted mind control experiments on thousands of non-consenting subjects in the United States, in Canada, and almost certainly in Europe. In those files, scattered references to France, to a town in the South, to a project called SPAN, to a scientist named Olson, and to documents that someone was told to bury. Here is what I keep thinking about. Roche-Briand, the baker, the man whose bread was officially blamed. He died with his reputation destroyed. His family lived with that shame for decades.
If the CIA did what the documents suggest, if they sprayed an unknown substance over a town of 500 innocent people, if 7 of those people died as a direct result, nobody was ever charged. Nobody was ever tried. Nobody was ever held accountable. The Rockefeller Commission, the same commission that David Belin directed, the same man asked to bury the files, investigated CIA wrongdoing and found very little. Congress held hearings in 1977 and passed new oversight laws. But the people of Pont-Saint-Esprit, they received nothing. No acknowledgement, no apology, no explanation. Just a story about bad bread that the government told them and expected them to believe.
The documents are real. The CIA program is real. The deaths are real. What remains disputed is the connection between them. But here is the question I want to leave you with. When a government agency spends 50 years saying an incident was caused by a fungus, and when declassified documents surface showing that agency had a classified program to do exactly what happened in that town, and when the scientist most likely to know the truth falls from a 13th floor window, and when someone inside that agency asks for the files to be buried, at what point does disputed become deliberately hidden? The archives are open. The documents are public. The link to the National Archives is in the description. Read them yourself and ask the question the CIA has never answered. What really happened in Pont-Saint-Esprit? And how many other towns were there?